I never imagined I'd feel such profound satisfaction watching my sister struggle to fit her designer clothes into moving boxes. The same sister who, 7 years earlier, had lounged on my bed scrolling through paint swatches on her phone while I was forced to haul my belongings down to our unfinished basement. Life has an exquisite way of balancing the scales when you least expect it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Ellison, and I now own the mortgage to the house my parents once banished me to the basement of. Not through inheritance or luck, but through my own blood, sweat, and calculated strategy. It was an unremarkable Thursday evening when everything changed. No dramatic confrontation, no heated argument, just the casual cruelty of parents who decided their eldest daughter's space was suddenly negotiable. I was hunched over my laptop at the kitchen island, headphones on, frantically trying to finish a presentation for my entry-level marketing job. Dad walked in, casually dropped a stack of storage bins beside me, and cleared his throat to get my attention. "Your sister got accepted to Westlake Arts Academy," he announced, his tone suggesting this was cause for unquestioning celebration. "She'll need a proper bedroom for her senior year, somewhere she can set up her easel and have good natural light." I pulled off my headphones, certain I'd misunderstood. "What does that have to do with storage bins?" Mom appeared in the doorway, already wearing that placating smile I'd grown to dread. "Becca, honey, we've been talking about this for a while. Sophia needs your bedroom. It has the best light in the house, and you know how serious she is about her painting." The thing is, they hadn't been talking about this at all, at least not with me. I was 24 years old. I'd moved back home after college to save money while paying down my student loans. I'd been contributing $600 in rent each month, buying groceries, and handling the family's digital needs, from setting up the Wi-Fi to managing Dad's small business website. None of that seemed to matter now that golden child Sophia needed something. "Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the storage bins and the guilty flicker in Dad's eyes. "We've cleaned out the basement," Dad said, as if offering me a gift. "Put down that indoor-outdoor carpeting you liked at Home Depot last month. There's plenty of space down there. More than your current bedroom, actually." More space. As if square footage was the only consideration. Not the concrete walls that sweated moisture during summer months. Not the exposed pipes that groaned and knocked throughout the night. Not the single tiny window well that collected dead leaves and gave me a lovely view of people's ankles as they walked by. "You're moving me to the basement?" I tried to keep my voice steady, professional even, the way I would address a difficult client at work. "So Sophia can have my room?" "Don't say it like that," Mom chided. "We're not moving you to the basement. We're repurposing the spaces in our home to support your sister's education. This is her big chance, Becca. Westlake only accepts 12 students per year in their intensive program. Repurposing, as if I were an old dresser being relocated to make way for a shiny new couch. As if my comfort, my privacy, my dignity were just inconvenient obstacles to Sophia's artistic future. "When is this happening?" I asked, already calculating how quickly I could find my own apartment, what kind of security deposit I'd need, how much of my carefully accumulated savings I'd have to sacrifice. "This weekend would be best," Dad said, checking his watch as if my displacement was just another item on his to-do list. "Sophie's first semester starts Monday, and she'll need time to set up her studio space. This weekend, 2 days' notice. To completely upend my life." "I could help you pay for an apartment," Sophia offered, suddenly appearing behind Mom. She was 17, tall and willowy, where I was average height and curved, with the same dark hair but none of the frizz I battled. "Daily? Once my art starts selling, Ms. Winter says I could easily get $500 for one of my watercolors at the student showcase." Her voice held that familiar mix of condescension and forced generosity that made declining her help sound ungrateful. As if her hypothetical future success should somehow make me feel better about being displaced now. "That won't be necessary," I said, closing my laptop with a decisive click. "I'll move my things this weekend." My immediate compliance seemed to relieve them. Dad patted my shoulder awkwardly. "That's my practical girl. Always so sensible." Practical. Sensible. The words felt like weights around my neck. They'd been used to describe me my entire life. Usually when I was quietly accepting whatever disappointment was being handed to me, while Sophia was allowed to be passionate and creative and sensitive. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake in my soon-to-be former bedroom, staring at the lavender walls I'd painted myself 3 summers ago. The ceiling fan I'd installed with YouTube tutorials and borrowed tools. The built-in bookshelf Dad had helped me construct during a rare weekend when Sophia was away at art camp, and his attention wasn't constantly divided. By morning, I'd made a decision. I wouldn't find an apartment. Not yet. I didn't have enough, saved for a decent place without depleting my emergency fund, and my lease would inevitably start mid-month, meaning I'd be paying prorated rent on top of a security deposit. No, I would go to the basement. I would bide my time. I would save aggressively and plan my exit on my terms. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of perfect early autumn sunshine that seemed to mock my situation. I began packing methodically, sorting my belongings into categories: necessary for daily life, store in plastic bins, donate, trash. Mom hovered occasionally, offering unsolicited packing advice or reminding me not to hammer nails into the basement walls because it's technically part of the foundation. Sophia flitted in and out of my room, already measuring for curtains and discussing paint colors with Mom. "I'm thinking a pale sage green," she mused, running her hand along my bookshelf, the one I'd need to disassemble because it wouldn't fit down the narrow basement stairs. "It's more conducive to creativity than this purple." "No offense, Becca." I said nothing, carefully wrapping my grandmother's hand-painted teacup in bubble wrap. The one she'd given me before she died, whispering that I was her favorite even though we're not supposed to have those. I couldn't risk it breaking during the move. Dad and my younger brother Cameron helped carry the heavier items downstairs. Cameron, at 19, was the only one who seemed genuinely uncomfortable with the situation. "This is messed up," he muttered, as we maneuvered my dresser down the tight basement steps. "You know that, right?" I appreciated his solidarity, but there was nothing he could do. At least he was safely installed in the smallest upstairs bedroom, too small for Sophia's artistic ambitions, and had his freshman college apartment waiting for him when summer ended. By evening, the transformation was complete. My bedroom, now Sophia's studio, was half empty, awaiting her creative touch. And I stood in the center of my new basement apartment, trying to ignore the musty smell and the way the single overhead bulb cast ominous shadows across my hastily arranged furniture. Dad had set up a makeshift privacy screen using an old wardrobe and a tension rod with a curtain, my bathroom area containing a utility sink, and the half bath installed years ago when my grandfather had briefly lived with us. There was no shower or tub. I would need to go upstairs for that, through the kitchen, past everyone's curious eyes, with my toiletries and clean clothes bundled in my arms like some visiting poor relation. "It looks cozy," Mom declared, surveying the space with forced optimism. "And you have so much more room to spread out." I had arranged my bed against the only interior wall, hoping it would be warmer in winter. My desk sat beneath the single window well, where I'd have to work with a lamp regardless of time of day. My dresser stood against the far wall, beside the hulking furnace that would undoubtedly wake me whenever it cycled on during cold nights. "It's fine," I said, because there was nothing else to say that wouldn't start an argument I couldn't afford, both emotionally and financially, to have. "I'll make it work." "That's my girl," Dad said, relief evident in his voice. always practical. There it was again. Practical. The curse of my existence. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. They left me then, footsteps receding up the wooden stairs, the door at the top closing with a decisive click. I sat on my bed, now positioned where anyone coming down for laundry would need to walk past, and felt the first tears break free. This wasn't just about a bedroom. It was about what the bedroom represented: legitimacy, permanence, value. In moving me to the basement, my parents had made their priorities crystal clear. Sophia's potential mattered more than my present reality. I allowed myself exactly 10 minutes of crying. Then I wiped my face, opened my laptop, and created a spreadsheet titled Exit Strategy. I calculated how much I would need to save for a security deposit, first and last month's rent on a decent apartment. I researched average rental costs in my area. I added a column for unexpected expenses. With my current salary and expenses, maintaining my student loan payments, I could be out in 6 months if I cut all unnecessary spending. 6 months of basement living. 6 months of daily reminders of where I stood in the family hierarchy. I could do this. I had to. The first night was worse than I'd imagined. The basement had seemed merely cool during the day, but as darkness fell, the chill from the concrete floor seeped through the thin carpet and into my bones. I piled on extra blankets and wore socks, to bed for the first time since childhood. Every sound was magnified, the house settling, the furnace igniting with a whoosh that made me jump despite expecting it, water rushing through pipes over my head when someone flushed the upstairs toilet. At 2 a.m., the refrigerator's ice maker dropped a load of cubes with a crash that had me sitting bolt upright, heart pounding. I lay awake until dawn, watching shadows shift across the ceiling as cars passed on the street above, their headlights creating brief alien patterns through my window well. Morning arrived with the thunderous reality of footsteps overhead, my family starting their day directly above my head. I dragged myself up, shivering as I dressed quickly in the cold air. My closet, a metal clothing rack Dad had assembled, stood in the far corner, my work clothes hanging in neat rows like empty promises. I selected an outfit, gathered my toiletries, and steeled myself for the first of many awkward treks upstairs to shower. The kitchen was empty, thankfully. I hurried through to the main bathroom, locking the door with a sigh of relief at this small privacy. The hot water helped, sluicing away some of the basement chill and the lingering sense of humiliation. I dressed carefully, applied makeup with particular attention, armor for the day ahead, and ventured back downstairs to gather my work materials. When I re-emerged, the kitchen was alive with morning activity. Mom at the stove flipping pancakes, Dad at the table with his coffee and newspaper, Cameron slouched over his phone, still in pajamas, and Sophia, bright-eyed and animated, talking about her plans to convert my former bedroom. I thought I'd put the easel by the window, she was saying, gesturing with her fork. And maybe we could switch out the overhead light for one of those adjustable track systems for better directional lighting. Of course, sweetheart, Dad nodded. Whatever you need for your art. I stood frozen in the doorway, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder, suddenly feeling like an intruder in what had once been my home too. Mom noticed me first. Becca, perfect timing. Pancakes are just ready. How did you sleep? The normality of the question, as if I hadn't just spent the night exiled to the basement, nearly broke my carefully constructed composure. Fine, I lied, moving to pour coffee into my travel mug. I can't stay for breakfast. Early meeting. There was no early meeting. But I couldn't sit at that table and pretend everything was normal. Couldn't watch Sophia chatter about painting my walls and replacing my light fixtures while everyone nodded encouragingly. At least take some pancakes with you, Mom insisted, already stacking them in a container. You need a proper breakfast. I accepted the container mechanically, thanked her, and escaped before anyone could see the tears threatening again. In my car, Hands gripping the steering wheel, I made myself a promise. This situation was temporary. A setback, not a life sentence. I would rise above it, build something better, and never put myself in a position to be so easily discarded again. What I didn't know then, couldn't have known, was that this moment of degradation would ultimately set me on a path to the most satisfying revenge imaginable, not through cruelty or confrontation, but through quiet determination and strategic patience. The basement wasn't my ending. It was just the beginning of a story that would eventually come full circle in ways none of us could have predicted. Living in a basement changes you. Not immediately, but gradually, like water carving channels through stone. After 2 weeks in my new apartment, I'd developed a routine born of necessity rather than choice. I woke at 5:30 a.m. to shower before anyone else stirred. I ate breakfast at a small folding table beside my makeshift kitchenette, really just a mini fridge, microwave, and electric kettle I'd purchased to avoid the increasingly uncomfortable family meals upstairs. I left for work by 7, often staying late at the office where at least I had a desk that was truly mine, in a space where I wasn't an afterthought. The basement itself presented challenges I hadn't anticipated. October brought heavy rains, and I discovered the first leak during a particularly fierce storm. Water seeped in through a crack near my bookshelf, forcing me to move my books and place towels along the wall. When I mentioned it to Dad, he promised to take a look this weekend, but Sophia had a showcase at her new school that took priority. The towels remained in place for 3 weeks. Then there were the spiders, countless tiny invaders that seemed to materialize from the very walls. I wasn't normally squeamish, but waking to find one crawling across my pillow pushed me to my limit. I bought sticky traps, peppermint oil, and finally paid for an exterminator myself when Dad balked at the unnecessary expense. "It's just a few house spiders, Becca," he said, dismissive as ever. Part of basement living. As if I'd chosen this arrangement. As if this were some bohemian lifestyle experiment rather than an exile. The worst part wasn't the dampness or the pests or even the lack of natural light. It was the daily reminders of my diminished status in the family, hearing footsteps overhead as everyone went about their lives. Sophia's music filtering down through the floor as she worked on her art projects in my former room. The casual way. Mom would call down the stairs, "Becca, honey, we need the basement for storage this weekend. Can you tidy up a bit?" My space, already compromised, was apparently still subject to their needs and whims. The one unexpected blessing was Cameron's regular visits. My brother took to stopping by several evenings a week, sprawling across my bed with his laptop while I worked at my desk. "I'm escaping the Sophia show," he explained one night, rolling his eyes. "Everything's about her portfolio now. Dad installed track lighting yesterday, the fancy kind that costs a fortune." I tried not to feel the sting of that. Dad had refused to replace the single overhead bulb in the basement, claiming it provided plenty of light for reading and such. "How's the art prodigy doing?" I asked, keeping my tone light, though we both recognized the irony. Cameron snorted. "Stressed. Apparently being exceptional comes with expectations. Her teacher said her use of light lacks subtlety, and she had a meltdown at dinner." "Which I missed because I was down here," I observed. "Trust me, you didn't miss anything worth seeing." He glanced around my space, taking in the carefully arranged furniture, the string lights I'd hung to combat the gloom, the colorful tapestry concealing the water-stained wall. "You've done a lot with this dungeon. Just making the best of things until I can move out." I turned back to my laptop, where I'd been researching apartments during my lunch breaks. Nothing in my price range so far. Not without sacrificing. My aggressive savings plan? When will that be? Cameron's voice held genuine curiosity. 6 months if things go according to plan. I didn't share that I'd been applying for higher paying positions, hoping to accelerate my timeline. Cameron was quiet for a moment. "It's messed up, you know, what they did." I know. What else was there to say? No. I mean, he sat up, suddenly earnest. I don't think you do know. Mom and Dad gave Sophia your room without even discussing it with you first. They decided her art was more important than your basic comfort. If they'd done that to me, I'd be furious. His assessment struck me silent. I'd been so focused on adapting, on surviving, on not rocking the boat, that I'd suppressed the anger that rightfully belonged to me. What good would being furious do? I finally asked. It wouldn't change anything. Maybe not, he conceded. But at least you wouldn't be acting like this is normal or okay. Cameron's words lingered long after he left. That night, I added another column to my exit strategy spreadsheet, professional development. I began researching courses I could take to increase my marketability, industry certifications that might justify a raise, networking events where I might connect with potential employers. If moving to the basement had revealed my place in the family hierarchy, then I would use that painful clarity to propel myself forward. Out of the basement. Out of this house. Out of the role of practical, reliable Rebecca, who could be counted on to accept whatever scraps of consideration came her way. November arrived with bitter cold that penetrated the basement's concrete walls. I bought a space heater, only to blow a fuse the first time I ran it simultaneously with my hairdryer. Dad installed a dedicated circuit, the first home improvement he'd made for my benefit, but grumbled about the electricity bill. Maybe spend less time down here, he suggested, as if I had chosen this subterranean existence. Come upstairs where it's warmer. Your mother misses having you around for dinner. The invitation felt hollow given the circumstances, but I agreed to Sunday family dinners, partly to maintain peace, partly because my food budget was stretched thin between student loan payments and my growing escape fund. That Sunday became an exercise in performative normality. Mom prepared pot roast, Dad opened wine, Cameron texted under the table, and Sophia dominated the conversation with tales from Westlake Academy. Ms. Winters says my use of negative space is evocative, she announced, helping herself to seconds before I'd finished my first serving. She's recommending me for the summer intensive in New York. New York, Mom beamed. That's incredible, honey. It's competitive, Sophia hedged, though her smug expression suggested she had no doubts. And expensive. The program costs $8,000 plus housing. The table fell silent. $8,000. More than my outstanding student loans. More than I'd saved toward my apartment fund despite months of disciplined budgeting. Well, Dad said finally, if that's what it takes for your art career, we'll figure it out. Your talent deserves investment. I kept my expression neutral while something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. My education, a practical degree in marketing, had come with strict conditions. Maintain a 3.8 GPA. Work part-time to contribute. Apply for every scholarship possible. Take extra credits to graduate early and save on tuition. For Sophia, $8,000 for a summer program was simply an investment in her future. No conditions, no expectations of contribution. Maybe Sophia could get a part-time job to help with costs, I suggested, cutting my pot roast with precise movements. I worked all through college. It teaches valuable time management. Mom's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Oh, I don't think that would be wise. Her art requires such focus and creative energy. A job would be a distraction. Besides, Sophia added, oblivious to the tension, summer jobs pay, what, minimum wage? That would barely make a dent in the program cost. It makes more sense for me to concentrate fully on developing my portfolio. The logic was so self-serving, so perfectly aligned with what Sophia wanted that I almost laughed. Instead, I took a deliberate sip of water and changed the subject. That night, lying in my basement bed listening to the house creak above me, I made a decision. 6 months was too long to wait. I needed out sooner, even if it meant compromising on my ideal exit plan. The next morning, I called Renee Williams, a former college classmate who'd been looking for a roommate in the city. The apartment was a 45-minute commute from my office, in a neighborhood I'd previously deemed too lively for my taste, but the rent was manageable with a roommate. We agreed I'd move in at the start of December, just 3 weeks away. I didn't immediately share my plans with my family. Instead, I began quietly organizing, donating clothes I rarely wore, digitizing old photos and documents to save space, selling furniture that wouldn't fit in my new, smaller room. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. 2 weeks before my planned departure, I finally broke the news over dinner. "I've found an apartment," I announced during a rare lull in conversation. "I'll be moving out on December 1st. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. "Moving out? But why? Where?" I outlined the basics: location, roommate situation, proximity, to work, in the same practical, unemotional tone they'd used to inform me of my relocation to the basement. "But this is so sudden," Mom protested. "December is a terrible time to move. It's nearly Christmas." "I've already signed the lease," I said, a small lie to forestall the arguments I knew would come. "The timing works with my budget." Another slight stretching of the truth, as the move would deplete most of my savings. "Is this because of the basement?" Dad asked, finally addressing the elephant in the room. "We can look at making it more comfortable if that's the issue." The offer came 4 months too late to feel like anything but obligation. "The basement is fine," I replied, echoing their repeated assurances whenever I'd raised concerns about the space. "This move is about independence. I'm 24. It's time." Cameron caught my eye across the table, a ghost of a smile playing at his lips. He knew. Somehow, without my saying a word, he understood exactly what this was. Not just a move toward independence, but a deliberate step away from a family dynamic that had consistently undervalued me. Sophia, predictably, made the situation about herself. "But who will help me with my application essays for the summer program?" "Becca's the best proofreader." "I'm moving across town, not across the country," I said evenly. "I can still review your essays by email." The discussion continued in circles, with Mom raising logistical concerns, Dad questioning my financial readiness, and Sophia alternating between complaints about losing my help and excited speculation about converting the basement into a photography darkroom. Not once did anyone say, "We'll miss you," or "The house won't be the same without you." Their reaction only confirmed I was making the right choice. The day of my move arrived with surprisingly little fanfare. I'd rented a small moving truck and enlisted Cameron's help, along with 2 friends from work who'd been outraged on my behalf when they learned about my basement exile. Mom hovered anxiously, offering unsolicited packing advice and repeatedly asking if I was sure about this apartment with a complete stranger. "Renee's not a stranger, Mom. We went to college together." "Still, you never really know someone until you live with them. Remember, you can always come home if things don't work out." Home. The word stuck in my throat. This house had stopped, feeling like home the moment they decided my space was dispensable. Dad helped carry the heavier items, making brief, awkward attempts at connection. "This wasn't personal, Becca. We just did what made sense for the family at the time." I nodded, without responding. He wanted absolution, and I wasn't ready to give it. Sophia appeared only briefly, ostensibly to say goodbye, but really to ask if she could have the dresser I was leaving behind. It would be perfect for storing my canvases. By early afternoon, the truck was loaded, the goodbyes said, and I was following my friend's car toward my new life. As we turned the corner, I glanced in the rearview mirror at the house growing smaller behind me. The only home I'd ever known? Suddenly just a building containing people who shared my DNA but had failed to recognize my worth. I felt lighter with each mile that separated us. The new apartment was everything the basement wasn't. Bright, warm, and mine by choice rather than relegation. Yes, it was small. Barely 700 square feet shared between 2 bedrooms, a compact living room, and a kitchen that could generously be described as efficient. But the windows faced east, filling the B space with morning light. The building had laundry facilities in the basement, a basement I could visit for practical purposes and then happily leave behind. Renee made an ideal roommate, busy with her own life as a graphic designer, respectful of boundaries, and fond of the same true crime documentaries I used to unwind after work. We quickly established comfortable routines, dividing household responsibilities equitably, something I realized had never happened in my family home. Most importantly, I slept through the night for the first time in months. No furnace roaring to life beside my bed, no footsteps overhead, no feeling of being buried alive. Just quiet, peaceful darkness and the distant hum of city traffic like a lullaby affirming my independence. December melted into January, and I settled into life on my own terms. I visited my family for Christmas Day only, bearing carefully selected gifts and a polite smile that revealed nothing of my inner transformation. I fielded Mom's worried questions about my tiny apartment, and Sophia's complaints that I never came home anymore, with the practiced deflection of someone who had emotionally moved on. Only Cameron seemed to recognize the change in me. As I was preparing to leave the Christmas gathering, he helped carry my gifts to the car. "You seem different," he observed, studying me in the fading winter light. "Stronger," I considered this. "Not stronger, just clearer about what I deserve." He nodded slowly. "I get that. I'm heading back to campus next week, but let's grab dinner soon. Just us?" "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. Cameron had been the only one to acknowledge the injustice of my situation. The only one who'd visited me in the basement without an ulterior motive. He deserved a place in my new life. As January's bitter cold gave way to February's tentative thaw, I received unexpected news at work. Nina Patterson, the marketing director who'd become something of a mentor, called me into her office late one Friday afternoon. "Rebecca," she began, uncharacteristically serious, "how do you feel about digital marketing strategy?" "It's where the industry is heading," I replied cautiously. "I've been taking some online courses to strengthen my skills in that area." She smiled, sliding a folder across her desk. "I know. I've noticed. That's why I'd like to offer you a new position. Junior Digital Strategist. It comes with a substantial salary increase and the opportunity to lead your own projects." I opened the folder with fingers that trembled slightly. The salary printed at the top of the offer letter was nearly 40% more than my current compensation, enough to potentially live without a roommate, enough to accelerate my long-term financial goals, enough to never worry about having to move back to my parents' basement. "Why me?" I asked, genuinely curious. Nina leaned back in her chair. "Because you're adaptable, creative under pressure, and frankly, because you work harder than anyone else in the department. I've watched you transform since moving into your new place. There's a confidence in your presentations now, an assertiveness in your ideas. Whatever changed, it's working for you, and I want it working for our clients." What had changed was simple. I'd recognized my own value, even when, especially when, my family had failed to do so. The basement hadn't broken me. It had revealed what I was capable of surviving, adapting to, and ultimately transcending. I accepted the position on the spot. That evening, as I celebrated with Renee over takeout and cheap champagne, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Basement flooded during today's thaw. Good thing you moved out when you did. Dad says foundation might need expensive repairs. Hope. You're doing well. Love, Mom." I stared at the message, a laugh bubbling up from someplace deep inside me. The irony was too perfect. The space they'd relegated me to, insisted was perfectly comfortable and just needed some getting used to, was now revealing its fundamental flaws. I responded with a sympathetic message and set my phone aside, turning back to my celebration. Little did I know that this casual mention of foundation issues would eventually become the cornerstone of my greatest triumph, and the moment when life would truly come full circle. But that part of the story was still several years away. First, I had to become someone new, someone who would never again accept being relegated to the basement of her own life. My promotion to junior digital strategist transformed more than just my bank account. It remodeled my entire sense of self. For the first time, I wasn't just Rebecca Ellison, the reliable daughter who did what was expected. I was Rebecca Ellison, rising marketing professional with insights worth listening to. The salary increase allowed me to make a decision that surprised even me. Instead of immediately seeking a better apartment or splurging on luxuries I'd denied myself, I chose to invest in professional development. I enrolled in an exclusive digital marketing certification program, the kind that met on Tuesday evenings, in sleek downtown conference rooms where wine was served in actual glasses, not plastic cups, and industry leaders shared insights you couldn't find in online courses. That's where I met Diane Mercer. I noticed her before she noticed me, a woman in her early 50s with a geometric silver bob and statement jewelry, who commanded attention, without raising her voice. When she spoke about conversion analytics, everyone leaned forward. She wasn't just knowledgeable, she was magnetic. During the networking session after class, I hovered near the cheese platter, calculating how many mini quiches constituted an acceptable dinner when Diane appeared beside me. "The trick," she said, startling me, "is to fold the napkin into a makeshift pouch. You can fit at least 6 in there without looking desperate." I laughed, surprised by her candor. I was thinking 4 was my limit. Amateur. She extended her hand. Diane Mercer, Catalyst Digital. I recognized the company name immediately. A boutique agency known for landing Fortune 500 clients despite their small size. Rebecca Ellison, Brinkman and Associates, her eyebrow arched. Logan Brinkman's outfit? Solid traditional agency, not exactly cutting edge though. Instead of defending my employer, I surprised myself with honesty. That's why I'm here. I want to be where digital marketing is going, not where it's been. Diane studied me with new interest. Smart. Most people defend their company's outdated approaches until the day they're laid off. She pulled a business card from a sleek case. I host a monthly roundtable for promising digital strategists. Small group, invitation only. This Thursday, 7 p.m. Come with ideas, leave with connections. She moved on before I could respond, leaving, me holding a heavy cardstock rectangle that felt like a golden ticket. I attended Diane's roundtable with equal parts excitement and terror. The venue was a private dining room at Harlow's, the kind of restaurant I'd only ever walked past, never entered. Around the table sat 8 professionals, all at least a decade older than my 24 years, all with impressive titles and agency experience. Our newest addition, Diane announced when I arrived, Rebecca Ellison, junior digital strategist at Brinkman, but not for long if she's as smart as I think she is. The evening transformed into the most challenging, exhilarating professional experience of my young career. These weren't just marketers. They were digital revolutionaries, debating platform algorithms and consumer psychology with the intensity of people who genuinely cared about their craft. I offered opinions cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as my insights were met with thoughtful responses rather than dismissal. Near the end of the evening, after most attendees had departed, Diane slid into the chair beside me. "You held your own tonight. Not easy with this crowd. Thank you for including me. It was..." I searched for the right word. "Illuminating." "Illuminating," she repeated, amused. "Most people say intimidating after their first time." "That too," I admitted. "But worth it." She nodded, signaling the server for another glass of wine. "Tell me something, Rebecca. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I'd prepared stock answers for this question during countless interviews. leading a team, growing my expertise, contributing to agency success. None of them felt honest enough for this moment. Running my own consultancy, I said instead. Specialized in digital strategy for traditional businesses transitioning to online models, small enough to be selective. About clients, large enough to make a real impact. Diane's smile widened. Ambitious. Good. Now, what's stopping you from starting now? Experience. Connections. Capital. I ticked off the items on my fingers. The usual suspects. Experience comes with time. Connections. She gestured around the empty table. I can help with. Capital. She paused, swirling her wine. That's where most people get stuck. They save their paychecks, waiting until they have enough to start. Meanwhile, opportunities pass them by. What's the alternative? Learning to make your money work harder than you do. She leaned forward. I'm not just a digital marketer, Rebecca. I'm an investor, real estate primarily. It's built more wealth for me than client work ever could. This conversation veered into territory I hadn't expected. My financial education consisted of budgeting apps and aggressive student loan repayment strategies. Investment seemed like something people did after they'd already achieved security, not as a path to get there. I don't have money to invest, I said simply. Everyone says that, Diane replied. What they mean is they don't know how. To start small and scale strategically, she pulled out another business card, writing on the back. This is my personal number. Call me next week. We'll have coffee and talk about how to build wealth when you're starting with almost nothing. That coffee meeting became the first of many. Over the next 6 months, Diane evolved from networking contact to mentor to friend. She taught me to see money differently, not just as a resource to be saved, but as a tool to be leveraged. She introduced me to the concept of house hacking, the power of compound interest, the strategy of starting small in real estate with a duplex or condo. The thing about property, she explained during one of our regular sessions, is that it's tangible in a way stocks and bonds aren't. You can improve it, transform it, add value through your own efforts. For someone like you, practical, detail-oriented, willing to learn, it's the perfect investment vehicle. Under her guidance, I opened my first investment account. I restructured my student loan repayment plan to free up capital for growth. I began studying real estate listings not as a hopeful future resident, but as an analytical investor, learning to recognize value where others saw only problems. Meanwhile, my professional reputation continued to grow. The certification program led to speaking opportunities at industry events. The connections from Diane's roundtable resulted in collaborations that enhanced my portfolio. 9 months after my promotion, I was offered a senior digital strategist position at a competitor agency with another substantial salary increase. Take it, Nina advised when I sought her counsel. You've outgrown what we can offer you here. Smart directors build networks of talented people, not cages to keep them in. I accepted the new position with a curious mix of confidence and gratitude. Confident in my abilities, grateful for the path that had led me here. The basement exile that had once seemed so cruel now appeared almost necessary, a catalyst that had propelled me out of complacency and into momentum. Through all this professional growth, my relationship with my family evolved into something distantly cordial. I visited occasionally, usually for holiday gatherings or Cameron's brief returns from college. These visits took on a ritualistic quality. Mom would fuss about my too demanding job. Dad would make awkward attempts at connecting, threw comments about my car's maintenance schedule, and Sophia would dominate conversations with tales of her artistic triumphs and challenges. I observed these dynamics with the detached curiosity of an anthropologist studying a foreign culture. These people were my blood relations, but they felt increasingly like acquaintances I'd known in a previous life. The most significant change was in how I responded to them. Where once I'd swallowed contradictions and accepted inequality as my lot, I now spoke with the calm assertiveness of someone who knew her worth. When Mom complained that I never visited, I replied, "I come when I can balance it with my other priorities, rather than apologizing and promising to do better." When Sophia lamented that I'd missed her spring showcase, I said, "I'm sure it was wonderful. I had a client presentation that evening that couldn't be rescheduled, instead of feeling guilty for prioritizing my career." Most tellingly, when Dad made a passing comment about how I could move back home to save money, now that the basement's been properly waterproofed, I smiled and said, "I prefer making my own housing decisions these days," without a trace of bitterness. My emotional distance wasn't about punishment or resentment. It was self-preservation, creating necessary boundaries between the person I'd been and the person I was becoming. 18 months after moving out, I reached a milestone I'd once thought might take years. I was ready to buy my first property. Not a single-family home for personal use, but a small condominium in an up-and-coming neighborhood, purchased specifically as an investment. Diane had connected me with a realtor who specialized in investment properties and understood my goals. After viewing 17 potential units, I found the perfect opportunity: a one-bedroom condo in a 1960s building undergoing revitalization. The unit needed cosmetic updates, nothing structural, just the kind of aesthetic improvements I could manage myself with YouTube tutorials and weekend work. "It's perfect for your first investment," Diane confirmed after walking through it with me. "Buy at the low end of an appreciating market, make targeted improvements, build equity through both loan payments and added value. Then either hold it as a rental or sell it to fund a larger investment." The day I signed the closing papers, becoming a property owner at 26, I experienced a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. I'd done this myself, through strategic planning and disciplined execution. The basement girl had become a property investor. I spent the next 3 months renovating the condo on evenings and weekends. I painted cabinets, installed new fixtures, replaced dated carpet with modern laminate flooring, and transformed a shabby unit into something stylish and contemporary. The total renovation cost came in under budget, and when I had the property reappraised, its value had increased by nearly 20%. Following Diane's advice, I decided to hold the property as a rental rather than selling immediately. The rental income would cover the mortgage, property taxes, and homeowners association fees with a small monthly profit. Money I could save toward my next investment. I found a responsible tenant, a young professional like myself, and officially transitioned from homeowner to landlord. The experience taught me about property management, tenant relations, and the complexity of building passive income. Lessons that would prove invaluable sooner than I expected. 2 years after my promotion to junior digital strategist, I had evolved into someone barely recognizable to my former self. Senior digital strategist at a prestigious agency, property investor, regular speaker at industry events, and mentee of one of the city's most connected marketing executives. I'd cultivated a small but significant professional network, built an investment portfolio beyond my condo, and established a reputation for innovative thinking. I'd also developed a close friendship with Diane that transcended our initial mentor-mentee dynamic. We met monthly for dinner, not just to discuss business, but to share the kind of deep conversations I'd never experienced with my own mother. During one such dinner, shortly after my 27th birthday, Diane surprised me with a proposition. "I'm launching a new venture," she announced over dessert. A boutique consultancy focused exclusively on digital transformation for traditional businesses. Smaller than Catalyst, more specialized, with higher margins and more selective client relationships. That sounds exactly like what I described. Wanting to do eventually, I noted, intrigued. "I remember." She smiled. "Which is why I'd like you to join me as a founding partner. 20% equity stake, commensurate salary, and the chance to build something from the ground up." The offer stunned me into momentary silence. Partner, equity, building something new. Why me? I finally asked. You know dozens of marketers with more experience. Experience isn't everything. I want someone hungry, adaptive, and unafraid of calculated risks. Someone who sees opportunity where others see obstacles. She leaned forward. Someone who's already proven she can transform circumstances into advantages. The reference to my past wasn't lost on me. Somehow, Diane had intuited that my professional drive was fueled by more than ambition. It was powered by the determination to redefine myself beyond my family's limited perception. I'd need to give notice at Morgan & Reed, I said, already mentally calculating transition timelines. Of course, Diane nodded. Take the weekend to consider it formally, but I think we both know your answer. She was right. By Monday morning, I had drafted my resignation letter, begun organizing my client handover notes, and scheduled a meeting with Diane to discuss next steps. The decision felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable, exactly the kind of calculated risk that had been paying dividends in my life since leaving my parents' basement. Word of my career move spread quickly through my professional network, generating congratulatory messages and coffee invitations from connections eager to understand the new venture. I was fielding one such call when my personal phone lit up, with an unfamiliar local number. Rebecca Ellison, I answered, balancing my professional tone with the caution of someone who rarely received unexpected personal calls. Becca, it's Cameron. My brother's voice sent an immediate wave of concern through me. We texted regularly, but rarely called without scheduling it first. Cameron? Is everything okay? His hesitation told me everything before he spoke a word. Not really. It's Dad. He had a heart attack this morning. The world tilted momentarily. Despite our complicated relationship, the thought of my father in a hospital bed, vulnerable and mortal, struck somewhere primal within me. How bad? I managed. Moderate. They've stabilized him, but he'll need surgery. A bypass, maybe two. Cameron's voice held the strained quality of someone trying to remain calm in a crisis. Mom's falling apart. Sophia's in New York for that summer program, trying to get a flight back. I'm at Memorial Hospital with them now. Memorial Hospital? The same place Grandma had been treated for pneumonia when I was 10. The place where Sophia had gotten stitches after falling from her bike. The medical center that had been a constant in our family's life, now containing my father's threatened mortality. I'll be there in 40 minutes, I said, already gathering my purse and keys. Text me his room number. Thanks, Becca. The relief in Cameron's voice was palpable. There's something else you should know before you get here. What is it? They were going to call you themselves, but with everything happening. He took a deep breath. They're losing the house, Becca. Foreclosure. Dad's been hiding financial problems for months. The heart attack happened right after he opened. The final notice from the bank. The revelation struck me with physical force. The house, the center of our family's identity, the place I'd both loved and resented, the structure that had contained the basement that changed my life's trajectory, was being taken away. And suddenly, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place, certain details aligned in my mind. Mom's increasingly frequent mentions of cutting back. Dad's defensive comments about the economy whenever I mentioned my investments. The canceled family vacation. Sophia's complaints about having to apply for scholarships for her final year at Westlake when her first 3 years had been fully funded by my parents. The signs had been there. I just hadn't been looking for them. How bad is it? I asked for, the second time in our conversation, but now referring to a different crisis. Bad. The house is underwater on the mortgage. They refinanced multiple times for Sophia's school and those foundation repairs after the basement flooding. Dad's contracting business has been struggling since his last 2 employees quit. They're 3 months behind on payments. My mind was already racing, calculating timelines and options. I'm on my way. We'll figure this out. As I drove toward the hospital, toward a family crisis I hadn't anticipated and a potential opportunity I couldn't have engineered, I realized that life had presented me with a pivotal moment, the kind that would reveal not just who I had become, but who I chose to be moving forward. The basement had been the catalyst for my independence. The house's potential foreclosure might now become the vehicle for my most unexpected triumph. But first, I needed to see my father. To look into the eyes of the man who had helped relegate me to the basement and decide whether my next actions would be driven by compassion, opportunity, or perhaps most complicated of all, both. The antiseptic smell of Memorial Hospital triggered memories I'd thought long buried. Sitting in waiting rooms with math homework spread across my lap while Sophia had dance injuries examined, bringing Dad chicken soup after his appendectomy when I was 16, the endless hours during Grandpa's final days. Hospitals had always been places where I performed daughterly duties, maintaining my role as the reliable one who handled practical matters while others processed emotions. This time felt different. As I navigated the cardiac wing, I wasn't the dutiful daughter rushing to fulfill family obligations. I was Rebecca Ellison, businesswoman and investor, coming to assess a situation that involved both family ties and financial implications. The duality felt strange but not uncomfortable. Cameron waited outside Dad's room, his lanky frame hunched in a vinyl chair. He'd grown a beard since I'd last seen him at Christmas, making him look older than his 22 years. He stood when he saw me, relief washing over his tired features. "He's sleeping," Cameron said after our brief hug. "Mom just went to get coffee." Through the door's narrow window, I could see Dad's form under thin hospital blankets, monitors tracking his vital signs in silent vigil. He looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that reconfigured something inside me. This was the man who had sent me to the basement without a second thought, but also the father who had taught me to change a tire, who had built my first bookshelf, who had somehow failed to manage his finances despite always lecturing me about responsibility. "Tell me everything," I said to Cameron, moving us to a quieter corner of the waiting area. The story emerged in disjointed fragments. Dad's contracting business had been struggling for years, not just recently as I'd believed. The pandemic had initially brought a surge of home renovation projects, but rising material costs and competition from larger companies had slowly eroded his client base. Rather than downsize their lifestyle, my parents had compensated by refinancing the house multiple times. "The basement flooding was worse than they told you," Cameron explained, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. "It revealed serious foundation issues. Dad got quotes from 3 companies, and the cheapest was still $47,000. "Let me guess," I said. "They refinanced again to cover it." Cameron nodded. "And took extra to help Sophia with that summer program in New York, and her senior year tuition." The pattern was painfully familiar, prioritizing Sophia's needs and wants while making increasingly precarious financial decisions. Only this time, the consequences weren't just a displaced daughter. They were potentially catastrophic. "How much are they underwater on the mortgage?" "About $80,000. The housing market in our neighborhood tanked after that new highway rerouted traffic away from the main street. Property values dropped, but their mortgage didn't." My analytical mind was already calculating possibilities, running scenarios. The strategic part of me recognized a potential opportunity concealed within this family crisis. The human part felt a complicated mixture of concern, vindication, and something like grief for my parents' financial naivety. Our conversation paused as Mom appeared, carrying a coffee cup that trembled slightly in her hand. She'd aged visibly since Christmas, new lines etched around her mouth, gray strands more prominent in her hastily gathered ponytail. When she saw me, her expression cycled rapidly through surprise, relief, and finally, shame. "Rebecca," she said, softly, "you came." Of course I came. The response was automatic but genuine. Whatever complications existed between us, some bonds remained intact. She embraced me briefly, the scent of her familiar perfume momentarily transporting me back to childhood bedtime stories and weekend pancake breakfasts. "Cameron told you about the house?" she asked, pulling back to search my face. "Yes, and about Dad's business troubles." She nodded, eyes downcast. "We should have said something sooner. Your father, he was sure he could turn things around, too proud to admit how bad it had gotten." Her voice caught. "Now this. The doctor says stress was a major factor in the heart attack." We sat together, while she filled in more details, the full picture emerging like a particularly bleak financial portrait. Beyond the mortgage, there were medical bills, credit card debt, and a home equity line of credit, all precariously balanced in a system that had finally collapsed under its own weight. "We'll lose everything," Mom whispered. "At our age, your father's 61. I'm 58. Where will we go?" The question hung between us. In the old days, I would have immediately offered reassurance, taken on the burden of solving their problems. The new Rebecca paused, considering options and boundaries. "Let's focus on Dad's recovery first," I said finally. "Financial problems have solutions. We can explore those once he's stable." She seemed surprised by my measured response, perhaps expecting either immediate rescue or cold rejection. I was offering neither, just calm assessment and deferred planning. Dad woke shortly after, groggy from medication but alert enough to recognize me. Seeing him connected to monitors, his usually ruddy complexion now ashen, stirred complicated emotions. This was the man who had once seemed infallible to me, now laid low by a combination of physical and financial collapse. "Becca," he murmured, "you shouldn't have troubled yourself." Even now, framing my presence as an inconvenience rather than acknowledging it as support. Some patterns never changed. "It's no trouble," I said evenly. "How are you feeling?" Our conversation remained superficial. His discomfort, the doctor's prognosis, the upcoming bypass surgery scheduled for Monday. We carefully avoided any mention of financial troubles, as if the subject might trigger another cardiac event. After 20 minutes, a nurse arrived to check his vitals, and I used the opportunity to step out. In the hallway, I called Diane. Our relationship had evolved to the point where she was my first thought in moments of personal crisis, not just professional guidance. "My father's had a heart attack," I explained after brief pleasantries. "And my parents are losing their house to foreclosure." Diane absorbed this without the reflexive sympathies most would offer. Instead, she asked the question that cut to the heart of my internal debate. "What are you considering doing about it?" "That's just it. I don't know." I paced the quiet hallway. Part of me wants to help them. They're still my parents. Another part recognizes they're facing the consequences of choices they made, including how they treated me. And a third part sees a potential investment opportunity that feels almost karmic, Diane suggested. Exactly. They sent me to the basement. Now I could potentially own the whole house. It feels both vindictive and justified. It can be both, Diane said pragmatically. The best business decisions often satisfy multiple needs. The question is whether you can separate the emotional satisfaction from the financial reasoning enough to make a sound investment. It was precisely this clarity I needed. Permission to acknowledge the emotional component while ensuring it didn't cloud my judgment. The property could be a good investment if I can get it at the right price, I reasoned aloud. The foundation issues are significant but fixable. The neighborhood is undervalued currently but has renewal potential. And I hesitated. And I could potentially help my parents while still maintaining boundaries. Let them stay as tenants, with a proper rental agreement. No more financial favoritism toward my sister. No more unilateral decisions about space allocation. Diane's approval came through her thoughtful hum. You're thinking like an investor while acknowledging family. Complexities. That's mature. What's your next step? Research. I need to understand exactly where they stand with the bank, what stage the foreclosure is in, and whether a short sale might be possible. Good. Keep me updated. She paused. And Rebecca? Remember that whatever you decide, it should serve your long-term goals, not just resolve their immediate crisis. After we hung up, I returned to the waiting room, where Mom and Cameron sat in exhausted silence. Dad had been taken for additional tests, giving us space to speak openly. I want to help, I said without preamble. But I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. Do you have copies of the mortgage documents, foreclosure notices, everything related to the house? Mom blinked rapidly, hope and confusion warring on her face. In your father's home office. The filing cabinet to the left of his desk? Why? Because I'm considering buying the house. The statement landed between us like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples of shock across their expressions. Buying our house, Mom repeated slowly. Yes, if it makes financial sense as an investment. I would need to negotiate with the bank, understand the full extent of the repairs needed, and work out terms that make sense for everyone. Cameron's eyes widened with dawning comprehension. You'd be their landlord. Essentially, yes. They would pay reasonable rent, not inflated market rate, but not charity either. We'd have a proper lease agreement with clear terms. Mom's hands twisted in her lap. But it's our home, Rebecca. We've lived there for 30 years. And you refinanced the equity out of it multiple times until it wasn't truly yours anymore, I said gently but firmly. This way, you and Dad could stay there instead of being forced out by foreclosure. You'd have stability while rebuilding your finances, but with clear boundaries. The reality was slowly penetrating. I wasn't offering a bailout or a gift. I was proposing a business arrangement that acknowledged their crisis while protecting my interests and fundamentally reshaping our family power dynamic. We'd need to discuss this with your father, Mom said finally, when he's stronger. Of course, but the foreclosure timeline won't wait for his recovery. I'll need those documents to see what options we have. Cameron volunteered to take me to the house to collect the paperwork. As we drove in silence, the familiar streets of our neighborhood seemed different somehow, both intimately known and distantly assessed through an investor's eyes. The house itself stood exactly as I remembered, yet now I noticed details I'd previously overlooked. The aging roof shingles, the slight unevenness of the front steps indicating foundation issues, the outdated windows that surely leaked energy in winter months. What had once been simply home was now simultaneously a repository of memories and a potential investment property requiring significant work. In Dad's office, I found the documents precisely where Mom had indicated, meticulously filed despite the financial chaos they represented. As I sorted through mortgage refinancing papers, foreclosure notices, and foundation repair estimates, a more complete picture emerged. The situation was dire but not entirely unsalvageable. The bank had accelerated the loan due to missed payments, but formal foreclosure proceedings were still in early stages. This is worse than they admitted, Cameron observed, watching me organize papers into categories. But you really think you can fix it? Not fix it, I corrected. Transform it into something different. The existing arrangement isn't sustainable. This would create a new paradigm that could work for everyone. He studied me with newfound respect. You've changed, Becca. In good ways. The basement changed me, I acknowledged. Or rather, what came after. Learning what I'm capable of when not defined by family expectations. As we prepared to return to the hospital, I paused in the hallway, glancing toward the basement door. On impulse, I descended the stairs, Cameron following curiously behind. The space had been partially renovated since my time there. New flooring, fresh paint, improved lighting. but I could still see shadows of my exile. The corner where my bed had stood, the water stain on the ceiling that had dripped onto my desk during rainstorms, the small window through which I'd watched feet passing by at sidewalk level. "I hated that they put you down here," Cameron said quietly. "It was the best thing they could have done," I replied, surprising us both with my sincerity. It showed me exactly where I stood and forced me to build something better. Standing in the basement that had once represented my lowest point, I felt something unexpected: gratitude. Not for the injustice or the discomfort, but for the clarity that had propelled me forward. The path from displaced daughter to potential property owner had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led me to this pivotal moment of potential reclamation. As we left, I took one last look at the house, not with resentment or nostalgia, but with the calculating eye of someone measuring its potential for transformation. Whatever happened next would redefine not just a property deed, but the fundamental dynamics of our family. And I was ready. Dad's surgery was successful, but recovery would be lengthy. As he stabilized in the cardiac unit, I initiated what would become the most complex negotiation of my life. Armed with financial documents and Diane's strategic guidance, I approached Meridian Bank with a short sale proposal for my parents' property. "You're the homeowner's daughter?" Mr. Levine, the bank's loss mitigation specialist, seemed skeptical during our first meeting, peering at me over reading glasses. "Usually we deal directly with the parties on the loan." "My father just underwent triple bypass surgery," I explained, sliding a folder across his desk. "I have power of attorney to discuss their financial matters, and I have a solution that might work for everyone involved." The folder contained my formal offer: purchasing the house at 80% of its current market value, which was still above what they'd likely recover through foreclosure after legal fees and carrying costs. I'd already secured financing through my excellent credit and investment history, with Diane co-signing to strengthen my position. "It's unorthodox," Mr. Levine admitted, reviewing my documentation. "But not unprecedented. The bank has no emotional attachment to the property, only financial interest in recovering our investment efficiently." That was exactly what I'd counted on. The bank's pragmatic approach contrasting sharply with my family's emotional entanglement with the house. For 2 weeks, I navigated dual negotiations, with the bank over purchase terms, and with my family over what would come after. Dad remained hospitalized, participating in discussions from his recovery bed during limited visiting hours. Mom oscillated between tearful gratitude for my intervention and thinly veiled resentment at the shifting power dynamic. "I've drawn up a proposed rental agreement," I explained during one hospital room conference, distributing copies to Mom and Dad. The monthly rent would be 40% below market rate, accounting for Dad's limited income during recovery. "You'd be responsible for utilities and minor repairs under $200. I'd handle major maintenance and property taxes." Dad studied the document with the careful attention of someone examining both a lifeline and a shackle. "This says the initial lease term is 2 years. "Yes. Renewable thereafter, with potential rent adjustments based on your financial recovery and market conditions. And we'd need your approval for any modifications to the house?" Mom's finger traced this clause with obvious discomfort. "Yes. As the property owner, I'd need to approve structural changes. You'd have reasonable freedom for decorative modifications." The unspoken undercurrent pulsed beneath our civil discussion. This was a complete reversal of authority. The parents who had once relegated me to the basement would now occupy the home, entirely at my discretion. Dad cleared his throat, his complexion still pale from surgery. "This is very thorough, Rebecca." "I've learned to be thorough in business arrangements," I replied evenly. "It protects everyone involved." Our gazes held momentarily, his reflecting the dawning recognition that his practical daughter had evolved into someone whose practicality now held power over him. The most volatile element in our family equation arrived 3 days later. Sophia burst into Dad's hospital room in a flurry of dramatic concern, having finally arranged her return from New York. She'd cut her hair into a fashionable bob and wore the kind of minimalist clothing that appeared simple but signaled expensive. Taste. Daddy. She embraced him carefully around monitoring equipment. I got here as soon as I could. The summer showcase was impossible to leave. We had gallery representatives visiting and... She paused, noticing me by the window. Rebecca, you're... here. Hello, Sophia. Yes, I've been helping organize things during Dad's recovery. Her smile flickered uncertainly. That's... good of you. I would have come sooner if I could, but my professor said... Sophia, Mom interrupted, gently. Rebecca has offered to help with the house situation. Oh, my sister brightened. You're lending them money? That's generous. Not lending, I clarified. I'm purchasing the house from the bank through a short sale. Mom and Dad will be renting it from me going forward. Sophia's expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching horror. You're buying our house? To be their landlord? The emphasis she placed on their spoke volumes about her perspective. The house belonged to our parents, regardless of mortgage realities or financial mismanagement. It's either this or foreclosure, Dad said wearily. The bank is accelerating the loan. We don't have options. But there must be something else we can do. Sophia turned desperately. Between our parents, a loan from someone else, or bankruptcy protection, or... Your sister is offering a solution that lets us stay in our home, Mom interjected. We should be grateful. The word grateful hung awkwardly in the air. I hadn't asked for gratitude. This was a business transaction, albeit one with personal dimensions. Later, Sophia cornered me in the hospital cafeteria, her composure barely containing her agitation. This is about the basement, isn't it? She demanded, voice low but intense. You're getting revenge for when they gave me your room. I considered her accusation while stirring creamer into mediocre coffee. That's a simplistic interpretation. Then, explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in and take control, to make them pay for prioritizing me. There was a certain irony in her perspective, casting herself as the victim even in a crisis precipitated largely by our parents' financial sacrifices for her benefit. But her assessment wasn't entirely wrong. The basement incident had altered my life trajectory, ultimately putting me in a position to make this transaction. I'm making a sound investment decision, I said finally. One that happens to help our parents avoid homelessness while establishing clear boundaries. If you see that as revenge, that's your interpretation. And what about me? Sophia asked, vulnerability briefly cracking through her indignation. Where do I fit in this new arrangement? I was planning to move home after graduation next month. My room? You mean my old room? I couldn't resist the pointed correction. She flushed. The room I've been using. I was counting on coming back while I established my art career. Here it was. The assumption that the family home remained her safety net, available whenever convenient, regardless of circumstances. The same assumption that had cost me my bedroom years ago. You're welcome to rent a room, I said carefully. At standard rates, we can draw up a separate agreement for you when the time comes. Sophia stared as if I'd suggested something outrageous. You'd charge me rent in our family home? It's an investment property now, I corrected gently. And yes, I would charge rent, just as I'm charging our parents, just as I pay rent on my own apartment. The conversation ended in strained silence, Sophia retreating to Dad's room while I remained in the cafeteria, processing the encounter. I'd anticipated resistance, even anger, but something in Sophia's genuine confusion struck me. She truly couldn't comprehend a world where her needs weren't automatically prioritized, because she'd never had to live in one. The bank accepted my offer the following week. The closing process moved with surprising efficiency, accelerated by the bank's desire to remove a non-performing loan from their books. Throughout, I maintained professional distance from the emotional aspects, focusing on documents, inspections, and financial transfers. On a crisp autumn morning almost exactly 3 years after I'd been displaced to the basement, I sat in a title company office signing final papers. The closing agent, a woman about my mother's age, smiled as she passed me the last document. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "It's always nice to see a young person investing in real estate." "Thank you," I replied, signing my name with deliberate strokes. "And such a lovely neighborhood. Will you be living there yourself?" "No. It's strictly an investment property." What I didn't explain was that this particular investment yielded returns beyond financial. It represented the complete transformation of my identity and position within my family system. I drove directly from closing to the hospital for Dad's discharge planning meeting. He was coming home tomorrow, to a house that was now legally mine. I arrived early, taking a moment in the parking lot to examine the new keys in my palm. Physical symbols of the transfer of power. The discharge meeting was clinical and focused. Medication schedules, dietary restrictions, follow-up appointments, physical therapy. Throughout, I took comprehensive notes while Mom nodded anxiously beside me. The cardiac care coordinator addressed most instructions to me rather than them, perhaps sensing I was the one who would ensure compliance. "Dad will need the bedroom on the main floor," I said as we walked toward the elevator afterward. "The one off the living room with its own bathroom. The stairs would be too challenging during early recovery." "But that's my home office, Mom," protested reflexively. "All my craft supplies can be relocated," I finished firmly. "Dad's recovery takes priority over craft supplies." Mom fell silent, perhaps recognizing the echo of her own logic from years before, when Sophia's art had taken priority over my bedroom. Dad watched this exchange with quiet resignation. "The first-floor bedroom makes sense," he agreed, voice still weak from surgery. "Just until I can handle stairs again." That evening, I enlisted Cameron to help reorganize the house before Dad's arrival. We converted the downstairs office into a recovery bedroom, moved Mom's crafting materials to a corner of the dining room, and ensured the bathroom was equipped with necessary safety features. As we worked, Cameron observed, "It's weird, right? Being the one making these decisions now?" "A little," I admitted, assembling a shower chair. "But necessary. For what it's worth, I think you're being fair. Firm, but fair." His assessment meant more than he knew. Throughout this process, I'd walked a precarious line between necessary boundaries and vindictiveness, between sound business decisions and emotional reactions. His perspective offered reassurance that I hadn't veered too far toward the latter. The next morning, I arrived, early to finalize preparations. Standing in the driveway, house keys in hand, I experienced a moment of profound symmetry. This was the same driveway where I'd parked my car stuffed with hastily packed belongings years ago, leaving in hurt and humiliation. Now I returned, not as the displaced daughter, but as the property owner. I unlocked the front door, my front door now, and stepped inside. The house smelled the same. Mom's cinnamon potpourri, Dad's woodworking projects, the particular sunlight on carpet scent that had defined home throughout my childhood. But my relationship to this space had fundamentally transformed. The basement door caught my eye as I moved through the entryway. On impulse, I descended the stairs one more time, surveying the space that had catalyzed my journey. In the quiet morning light, it seemed smaller, less ominous than in my memories. Just a basement, not a dungeon of despair, but merely the underground level of a house I now owned entirely. As I stood there, I realized that true power wasn't in reversing old dynamics or enforcing new rules. It was in the freedom to define my own relationship with this space, this family, this history. I could choose compassion without surrendering boundaries, authority without cruelty, connection without subjugation. By the time I heard Mom's car, pulling into the driveway, bringing Dad home to the house that was now mine, I had made my peace with both the basement and what it had made of me. I climbed the stairs to greet my family, not as someone seeking validation or fearing displacement, but as Rebecca Ellison, homeowner, investor, daughter on her own terms. The circle was complete. 7 months after becoming my parents' landlord, I stood in what had once been my childhood bedroom, now transformed into a home office for my growing consultancy. The sage green walls Sophia had painted were now a calm slate blue. The closet where I'd once hung teenage clothes now housed filing cabinets and reference materials. The window that had once framed my daydreams now illuminated my professional reality. The transition hadn't been seamless. Dad's recovery progressed slowly, complicated by decades of stress and poor health habits. Mom struggled with the role reversal, occasionally slipping into passive-aggressive comments about asking permission to hang pictures in our own home. Their adjustment to being tenants rather than owners revealed character traits I'd always sensed but never seen so clearly. Dad's pride manifesting as stubborn independence even when help was needed. Mom's resentment emerging in small rebellions against rental agreement terms. But there were unexpected positives too. With their housing situation stabilized and costs reduced through my below-market rent, my parents began tackling their remaining debt systematically. Dad found purpose in consulting on small home repair projects in the neighborhood, work that accommodated his physical limitations while utilizing his expertise. Mom started selling handcrafted items online, discovering a modest but satisfying income stream that bolstered both their finances and her sense of contribution. Most surprising was Sophia's evolution. After her initial outrage, she'd returned to New York to complete her final semester, maintaining distant communication through terse texts and occasional calls to our parents. When she graduated, she did not, as expected, demand accommodation in the family home. Instead, she took a small apartment with 2 other art school graduates in Brooklyn and found work at a gallery while developing her portfolio. "I've been thinking about things," she admitted during a rare phone call 3 months after I purchased the house, about how everything was always arranged around what I needed. I didn't see it before because, well, I didn't have to. Her awakening wasn't dramatic or complete. Privilege rarely dissolves overnight. But it was genuine. When she visited, at Christmas she paid for her own flight, brought thoughtful gifts purchased with her own money, and asked me about my business with authentic interest. She slept on the pull-out couch without complaint, acknowledging the irony with a self-deprecating humor I'd never before witnessed in her. "So this is what it feels like," she'd mused one morning, folding the bedding with unexpected care. "Not having your own space. I get it now. I mean, I don't fully get it. The couch is just for a week. But I understand better why you were so upset." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Sophia, this recognition represented significant growth. The most profound transformation, however, was in my relationship with the house itself. I'd purchased it primarily as a strategic move, part investment, part boundary establishment, part reclamation of power. What I hadn't anticipated was how owning the property would heal something fractured inside me. Every renovation decision became an act of reclaiming agency, replacing the worn carpeting with hardwood floors, updating the kitchen with modern appliances, installing a proper waterproofing system in the basement to prevent future flooding. Each improvement erased another memory of displacement while creating something new and wholly mine. I maintained my primary residence in my city apartment, visiting the family home weekly to check on maintenance issues and spend time with my parents. These visits evolved from tense interactions to something resembling mutual respect. Dad consulted me on household repairs, acknowledging my ownership while offering his expertise. Mom gradually stopped referring to it as our house and began asking rather than informing me about changes she wanted to make. 6 months after purchase, I converted the basement, my former exile, into a comfortable guest suite with proper insulation, recessed lighting, and an egress window that brought in natural light. The transformation was symbolic and practical, honoring the space's role in my journey while increasing the property's value. Cameron was my first guest, staying there during semester break and marveling at the changes. "It's unrecognizable," he observed, running his hand along the new wainscoting. "In a good way." "That's the point," I replied. "Some spaces need to be completely reimagined to serve a better purpose." The foundation, once cracked and leaking, was now solid and secure. The symbolism wasn't lost on either of us. Today marks 7 years since I was first told to move to the basement. As I prepare for a family dinner downstairs, one where I sit at the head of the table, in my house, hosting rather than accommodating, I reflect on the journey from displacement to ownership. The basement didn't break me. It built me. Each indignity became a stepping stone. Each boundary violation clarified what I would no longer accept. The parents who once relegated me to underground living now occupy the main floor at my discretion. The sister who took my room without question now visits as a guest, sleeping in the transformed basement by choice rather than relegation. Is it perfect? No. Complicated family dynamics don't resolve into fairy tale endings. Mom still occasionally slips into old patterns. Dad sometimes chafes at requesting permission for household projects. Sophia has progressed, but remains fundamentally Sophia. Talented, self-focused, though now with greater self-awareness. But the basement girl now owns the entire house, top to bottom. Not through inheritance or charity, but through strategy, perseverance, and the powerful alchemy of transforming injustice into opportunity. Life does indeed come full circle, but only if you're strategic about drawing that circle yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.